You were created to create.
And now that you're here, the only way to unlock and unfold that is you find ways to continue to create.
When you stop learning, you stop growing. Your biggest purpose is how are you going to crack the code on you?
Again, the A16 Basics, step 11 brings us into vision. Okay, vision. And so I want to start with scripture, Proverbs 29:18. Okay, and this is the King James Version, which states that where there is no vision, the people perish. Short and simple, okay? So Proverbs 29:18 again, where there is no vision, the people perish. And so this idea of perishing, it almost, I don't know if I'm pretty sure most people at this point do utilize the GPS. I mean, even in your own town, and I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of times for me, I've been born and raised in Amarillo, Texas, which is not a very big town at all, but I still managed to get lost. And I still will use my GPS system for somewhere that's been here for 20 years, but I just had never been there before, right? And so I bring up GPS because how many times, and I'm sure this has happened to you, where, even with a GPS and you're trying to get off on an exit, or maybe somebody's in the way. So there's a lot of sometimes recalculating, right? There's a lot of trying to figure out, okay, well now the GPS is updated. So much of that is what it looks like though, when you and I don't carry some type of vision. Maybe that's daily, but even deeper than that, what is your life vision? What is your spiritual vision, right? What is your vision for your future? All of this matters so much. So I want to hop into that. Okay. So again, going back to Proverbs 29:18, scripture, when we're reading this, he uses the word, we understand this word, perish. Okay. And now that word perish is dramatically different from the word like struggle. To struggle is a lot different than to perish. So it doesn't mean that, when you don't have vision, then you're struggling. And then we can calculate and look around at our world today and say, so many people don't have vision, that's why they struggle. No. This is a clear two categories. Struggling, obstacles, that might be one thing. Perishing, right? Completely forfeiting your gift, your ability, your opportunity at this gift, again, of life, complete difference. So before I move on, as I move on into really how vision has played out in my life, having it, partnering with it, like we're talking about today, and also not having that vision, I want you to drop a comment, if you would, on where are you with an actual vision for your life, okay? And if you're I want you to be honest. Now, I'm going to give you just maybe like 15 more seconds, but is that, if you're being honest, can you put vague? Maybe you've just been kind of loose with it. Hey, I got ideas, I got hopes, I got what, but it's not a specific, it's not a, clear vision. So if it's clear though, you work on that, something you take pride in, which is awesome, put clear. If not, put vague. I'm just curious. I'd love to know. And I'm going to tell you because depending on, what time of, what season, what time of life you're asking me, I've been very vague in a lot of seasons with my vision, my daily vision, again, my overall life vision, having no spiritual vision, which I'm about to get into. And then there's been times where I've been very intentional in partnering and refining and even experiencing an upgrade in what this thing is that we're talking about today, vision. Okay, so give you a little backstory about myself, and for me, just to be vulnerable and allow that to be something that you guys even witness and experience on, not only the A16 Basics, because this is a very vulnerable process, a very humbling process and journey to go through. Any kind of personal growth, real, personal development is going to require you to become vulnerable and really with yourself. And so as I share what kind of the vision or having a lack of look like for me. This takes me back to close to 12 to 10, between 10 to 12 years back. Okay. So I'm closer to 20, between 20, 22. That's when this took place for me. And, at one time before I pop into where I'm giving you my story, I had a vision. I had a vision going through, I'm fresh out of high school, decide and really convince myself that even though I didn't want to and I felt dumb when it came to academics, I would take on college. So I go to the community college, and fast forward, I'm having this vision because school's not really my path. I don't want to get some type of degree, but maybe if I can start a business, right? Maybe if I can give myself a pathway of being an entrepreneur, maybe I have some hope. So I leave school and I do that. And so for about 2.5 years, I'm building and expanding things. My first business, I'm fortunate at that time and really blessed because I'm able to get my wife at that time her dream car and us get into a really nice house. And we have no kids at this time, so money's going a lot further. We can do a lot more with it. And so I say that because fast forward, my vision though was clouded by pride. It started to really get to this place where ego was taking more of the driver's seat, and keeping my vision set on what made my ego feel good, what made the pride of having things or being the guy, or being the man, letting that become what led my vision, actually led me into a season and a place where I started to really, by the end of that season, I found myself doubting myself. I found myself really lost and became really one of the worst periods, or, at least at that point, and now looking back, seasons of my life. Looking back taught me the most, but was one of the most brutal and like one of those drop kick, rude awakening moments in life. Because at the end of it, I was, looking at not having a marriage anymore because my wife, even the vision she had of me was no longer the same. I had changed that because of pride and ego, becoming arrogant, becoming full of myself, right? Not tending to what we've talked so much in the A16 Basics all the way up until today, not doing these things, not carrying and sharpening and refining my vision, but letting pride and ego become the default driver of that. At this point, I felt like shit had hit the fan, and I had lost everything, and I felt like my creator, my God, no longer trusted me with responsibility, with power, with authority, with money. Anything, relationships, with influence, and I no longer trusted myself with that. I wanted these things. I had this vision to be successful, to start a business, to buy a house, to buy cars, and to be the guy, right? And that vision, it was fulfilled, but so much of my heart and mind still needed so much work. And so this is why vision is so important, because even in a negative aspect of we allow pride and ego to really influence your vision, it can lead you down into a destination that you're confused about. You thought it was everything you wanted on the other side. You had a vision that when I had more money, or when I had these kind of looks, or when I had this kind of spouse or partner, when I had this kind of car, the list goes on for the 98%. But yet on the other side of that, there's really no true fulfillment that is found, because peace is not something you can point to and find externally, right? Peace comes from a understanding and really holding and believing in and carrying a vision that is built upon something that is not existent now, but through faith makes it real and tangible. So that's how that inner peace actually allows us to be in a place of peace. But vision keeps us sustainable and on the path to knowing what's to come and that it will be worth it. So I want to move on to my next point. And this really takes us back into some more scripture. I love giving scripture. So quick overview in the book of Numbers, okay, between, I think it's chapters 13 and 14. It gives us a story about this promised land, which is Canaan, and there's 12 spies from this land that are sent out to the promised land, the land of Canaan, to go and basically scout it out. If we're gonna, if we as people want to go to this promised land, and the idea was overtake it, right? See what they have, see what it's all about, and then come tell us, and we'll see if it's really worth it. So they all go and they get sent out. These 12 spies, these 12, basically warriors in a sense for their country, and 10 come back scared. They come back scared, right? 12 different. I'm about to get into. And so in Numbers 13:33, they state like we seemed like grasshoppers when they seen these giants. Okay, and it states this understanding, like they basically got all big-eyed when they saw the kind of giants that were in this land. Now in this promised land, there was the milk and the honey, and there was plenty of resource and food and all of it. But whenever 10 of these 12 saw the size of giants and what was going on, that this same land had the exact same things that all 12 saw, but 10 of them saw something impossible to take on, and two of those 12, okay, Joshua and Caleb, saw the same giants, saw the same land, saw the same report, but reported back something different. And in Numbers 13:30, this is Joshua and Caleb coming back, and this is their report, and they're like, we can certainly do it. That's their answer. So the question again, can we take this land? Is it worth it? 10 of them? No. 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, oh yeah, we can do it. Same land, okay, same danger. The only difference was what they believed about themselves. What they believed about themselves. So I was bringing this back to what I was just stating last before this point, which was your vision is really, it's okay. Let me say it this way. It isn't about what's out there. That's not what your vision is. In a vision, I mean, yeah, it's nice to put, things externally as far as things to have in your vision, things to obtain, things to accomplish. But vision isn't about the external. It's about what you believe you're capable of walking into. Sometimes not only walking into, but walking through what you actually believe. Okay. Your way of being. I talk about this in a lot of other stuff. But check that out if you've never heard that before. Your way of being, what you actually believe, not what you in a concept or in a intellectual or in a I almost believe it way. No, you actually believe. So another way I like to state this is like, will you convince yourself for now? Because that's what it helps us to do. It helps us to almost sustain and really anchor in the faith that you need. How do you convince yourself for right now in this moment that we call reality, this chip of time, this chunk of time that we get, this moment? How can you use vision to convince you that right now doesn't really matter? But what you're doing in this moment, how you're showing up, how you're serving in this moment, multiple ways, layers on how to serve in the moment is really what matters, okay? And so, again, I want to give you something real quick, but I had this idea, and this when I talk about how can you convince yourself for now in this moment, and I want to give you an example of that. Okay, so and this stemmed from another video of some guy talking about this idea. And this was a little while back, but it got me thinking, man, that's so true. Okay. Even how simple vision, it's not even a life vision. I'm talking about vision throughout your day, vision of others, vision of why people do. Like, we tell ourselves these stories all day, every day about people, about what just happened, about you getting cut off. Right. And so I want you to just imagine the next time that you get cut off or somebody slams on their brakes right in front of you and, or doesn't use their blinker. I don't know, whatever it be. I want you to imagine that person is in a rush or maybe being an asshole because they have to go poop really, really bad. like, or they are about to go shit themselves if they don't hurry up, and maybe they had to cut you off and get off from that exit. Okay. But see, when we start to convince ourselves, because my vision for people overall in general, and some are convinced the opposite, that and mine is this: there are still more good, loving, capable, beautiful people in this world. There are more of those people than there are not. To me, I believe, and a lot of this goes back to, I've convinced myself, my vision of people, my vision of working with people, my vision of past experiences that have now become evidence even for my own self. I've convinced myself that people are good. People should be treated well. I should start with respect and honor before I start and assume disrespect. But so much of what we tell our stories in these small moments, somebody cuts you off, you get pissed, you start thinking about how much of an asshole they are. What if it was simply they have to hurry the hell up? If not, they will shit their tidy whities that day. And I think for me, that keeps me in this positive state so much easier and so much more simply. From the mental, again, attitude that I carry out of that moment, I move on now and I laugh from moments like that versus carry on some kind of, pissed off energy, and it leads to my next meeting or wherever I was on my way to. Like, nah, we can easily convince ourselves of something better, something funnier, something more serving to us. Okay. So I just wanted to let that land with a kind of a funny idea, but seriously, use it. You would laugh a lot more when people are essentially assholes to you than you would take it personal and be pissed off. So it's just something you could use. All right. So I want us to think about, what does that look like right now in the sense of how much of, or maybe you're currently in a season. How many seasons have you been through, or maybe it was a weak time frame and you were taking on what seemed impossible. You look like a grasshopper in your own eyes, right? And I know what this feels like because this is so much of what we're going to get into next week on step 12. Okay, the E. But I'm going to give you a little drop for next week. Okay, this is so much of what it takes and what it looks like when we evolve. Okay, giving you a little drop for next week. But even for me, keeping a vision and even having a vision that scared me, it really created some fear or anxiety that I had to work through. Got me to this very season, this very moment of what's been built, what's been developed, the mistakes, the lessons learned, the confidence overall. Wrap it all up, put it together in a box. The confidence now that it's delivered and allowed me to have, right? And I still have a vision for what is next year? What could next year look like? What could 2 years from now, 5 years? And it's still at this time, at moments, I'm the grasshopper. My eyes are, I don't know. And so in doing that, this is a natural part. Your vision at times, the something that challenges you, something that allows you to see another level that could be obtained, that is possible, that should scare you, is a part of this process and this thing that we call life. But to the average, no, let's avoid it. It's actually better to not have a vision, right? So that brings me to my next point. Why doesn't the average, why is the average so afraid of vision? Okay, why does 98% of our entire population, they know what it is, they like the idea of it. Maybe the only vision they carry is to have a vision one day. One day, man, I got this idea, I got this vision, right? So it really boils down, after so much of the years I've talked about what fear does and why it talks us out of, vision. When we look at Proverbs 29:18, and it talks about without vision, you perish. All right. So if I could put it in a nutshell, the top two lies, okay, that fear tells people. Okay, lie one, here it goes. I've tried that before. It didn't work. Never again. To some degree, okay? Lie one, Give it to you one more time. Maybe this sounds familiar. Maybe there's been something in your life that you've heard this one right here. I've tried before, it didn't work, never again. Maybe that was a process. Okay. And so in this, a lot of times, this is called learned. Research shows us this is called learned helplessness. Okay. So this basically goes back into one's belief that becomes, one's failure. So one of your failures starts to become now a permanent belief. There's research done on this. Okay. It's called learned helplessness. Because again, I tried and you did. It didn't work. It didn't. But then your conclusion and your evidence, because of that one experience, was never again. And research has shown us that you created something called learned helplessness, and that one failure became a permanent belief of why you can't, you won't, never again. Okay, think about that. Lie number 2. Okay, I'm not important enough to have a vision for my own life. Now, there's layers to that. There's all, or maybe even like it's just for your day. You know, to have a daily vision is just as important to have a life vision, a spiritual vision. Okay. But most people don't, they just think it's about surviving. It would be nice to even look at life as something that you could thrive in. But who am I, in a sense? You don't know your beauty. You don't know your worth. You don't know that you're not average. You're not just another ordinary 98% person unless you decide you want. You've been convinced to be, yeah. But lie number 2, I'm not important enough to have a vision. Who am I, right? So I brought up Brene Brown. I can't remember exactly what week, but I love Brene Brown. If you haven't heard of her, if you haven't studied her, check out her research. But she talks about this same idea. And I want to make sure. Foreboding? Is that right? Foreboding, see? Foreboding joy, okay? She does research on this, okay? So foreboding joy, what is this? People brace for disappointment before they even let themselves hope. Okay, this is another side of this. Because those fears, those lies you tried, yada, yada. So what does this look like? What is this? Well, you would rather accept and receive or at least anticipate disappointment before you will let yourself get too excited or you let yourself get high with hopes. So more people would rather be disappointed or brace for disappointment before they even let themselves have some type of dream or hope or whatever it may be. Is this you? Does this sound familiar? I don't know. You tell me, right? So it's easier to never hope than to hope and then be disappointed, right? If you disagree, let me know. If you agree, let me know. I just want to see where it's easier to never hope or dream or plan than to do that. Hope, dream, I planned, I had a whole strategy and then be disappointed because it didn't work. And let me tell you, I've been there. Not once, not twice. Like over 5,400 times in my life, from small to what felt like bigger. And we're not done. We're not over. It's not over for me. And most likely you either. So let's just keep seeing that vision keeps you clear. Okay. It keeps you moving. It keeps you grooving. So in step 3, we talked about fear is the opposite of love. And it's the same like root here. Okay. It's at the same time, like, whenever if we look at where does this stem from, whenever we look at what's keeping my vision stuck on scared, afraid, disappointment, past failures versus what's keeping my vision moving in a direction where I will forgive myself, I will try again, I will love again, I will hope again. It goes back to like what we talked about in step 3, okay? Love versus fear. Fear is the opposite of love. So now if you find yourself scared to make a vision, scared to make plans, scared to try again, something in your vision is still rooted in fear. That's all I will say. I'm going to move on to the next, okay? So in saying that, what does this look like? I want to call this next point paint without fear. Now, I'm not a very good painter. I've pushed myself to paint a little bit more, do this and that. But I want you to think about Bob Ross. Okay, imagine Bob Ross, and imagine if he was like afraid to just add something that, of course, what we see as just effortless, seamless. Like when he makes birds, it's just like, oh, and I'll try to do it just like him. It looks silly. It looks below average when I try to make birds like Bob Ross. But the experience and the leadership and the confidence and even the masterpieces of Bob Ross, and this is just one example, didn't happen and didn't get to that place if Bob Ross was an individual that painted with fear. Because one thing is, I wasn't a huge Bob Ross fan. This was just a great example for me to use. But I remember being a kid and watching him on TV and just kind of sometimes just pausing, right? I'm looking for cartoons. I'm looking for, something more my age. But Bob Ross is there with his big beard and, he's his sweet, inviting voice into whatever masterpiece. And he's showing you how to do it, making you feel like you can be doing the exact same thing. But for him to get to that place, he had to at some point, I can't tell you when or exactly how it started happening, but he started to create a vision of creating masterpieces that would come seamless in a way that he could show people how he's doing it. And so you and I, whatever this looks like, the masterpiece in the paint of your life could be working on cars and, or it could be, sculpting lamps that it's a part of your path. I don't know. It could be a clothing brand. It could be the 9-to-5 that you have, but you see how it helps and serves people. But whatever it is that you're doing, carry a vision and push yourself to continue to paint that vision, that future for you. And this way that you're serving and contributing, paint that future without fear. That's the only way to get to the masterpieces, right? And when we look back, like Caleb and Joshua, when I talked about in Numbers, the 12 spies, they didn't deny the giants. That wasn't why they were like, no, we didn't see no giants. They're small. They weren't denying it. They just refused to let their vision shrink to it, right? They didn't let themselves shrink down to this vision that they carried, which means that they had a big vision. Your vision is bigger than you are, and it takes you and allows you to become bigger and stronger and more capable. And yes, those things that we want, like more fulfilled, more happy, more. So paint the picture without fear. Don't hold back. That's what we have to understand and get and come back and remind ourselves, get ourselves the permission to. Okay, so this felt like a great place to go back into some scripture. Jeremiah 29:11, plans to prosper you, it talks about, right? If you're familiar with that, maybe you've never heard it, but in Jeremiah 29:11, these plans from your Creator, from your God, these are plans. This is a vision that your Creator has set out and already had for you. And those plans, that vision is to prosper you. His plans are to give you hope in a future. Now, why would that be in Scripture? Why would that be in the book of, what I call love? If this was something that was BS and not really attainable for us, not really something that we could actually experience. It is, okay? But vision is one of those things that is a part of unlocking and unleashing more and more of a future and a hope and a future, should I say. And so understand, more and more, vision is where those two things meet, hope and future. So as you look for in the future being tomorrow, the future being the end of the day, right? Those two things, hope and a future, is not separate. They're not two different entities. They are the same. It's partnered in, almost like a marriage, to give you both, right? Vision is what brings those two things together. So that's all I'll say about that. So I'm going to bring this to an end. And I want to give myself like 60 seconds to do that. So if I had some last minute, things to add to this for step 11 of the A16 Basics. In your vision, hey, paint big. Give yourself permission to paint big when it comes to your vision, even what you could do in a day. I'm not saying go and exhaust yourself. Again, this isn't about working harder. This isn't about doing more than everybody. No, this is about what can you actually convince yourself is possible and what you could actually do with 24 hours. Sometimes it's 48 hours. Sometimes it's a month, a year, right? And as you do this, as you think about who you want to become and you're putting in these reps, maybe it's showing up to the gym, maybe it's sending that text, having the conversation, maybe it's the morning meditations you've been trying to get to. I would say this morning, I actually got to make it to the golf course. Okay. Got to put in maybe 45 minutes to an hour. This is something I've talked about. I said I wanted to do for a long time. I gave myself permission to do that. It actually aligns into the vision of who I want Matt Lee to be. I did it. Now, can I be consistent at it? That's my plan. But my last question I have for you when it comes to vision, again, spiritual vision, life vision, these are all things that we get into in Allergic to Average. But when it comes to your vision, right? If you are not creating this, if you're not carrying this, if you are not conducting a way to evaluate this, then how and like who's going to do that? Who's going to carry a vision for you? Who's going to craft that vision for you? If not you, then who? Okay? If not you, then who? So I want to leave you with that as we close out on the A16 Basics journey. This week, step 11, which has been the V in average vision. So carry a vision just for your day, for your life, for what you were placed on this earth to do, because it was something special. But if you don't believe that and you hadn't been convinced, then I don't know if I can do that for you. So anyways, I love you guys. I appreciate you. Tune in Tuesday. It's me, Matt Lee. Love you guys. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.